welcome everybody. It's always a little bit of a gamble when one of these things gets set up as the sort of response you're going to get. So I think today's response, and that's been in common also in West England as well, it sort of gives one a little bit of comfort that we've actually picked a topic that people want to hear about. Perhaps more importantly, we picked a speaker that's worth listening to. I think probably some of you already know Liz Bridge or know of Liz Bridge. I mean, she's got a long track record in the area of advising members of ours and other construction-related organisations about tax issues. She actually started working for HM Revenue and Customs some time ago.
A long time.
Yeah. Certainly, well, 1990. I suppose that's not too embarrassing, is it? You were an apprentice at the time. Back in the day, on Fast Track programme there, ran a local tax office, involved in taxing a major bank, which sort of lifted my heart a bit, and then really focused on overseas issues for a while, but then started working in the industry back in after 1990, from 1990, as head of tax for what was then called the Building Employers Federation, which then became the Construction Confederation, which then became nothing. But carried on, one of the activities that carried on beyond the days of the Construction Confederation was something called the Joint Taxation Committee, basically because it performs a very important function, which is representing the industry on tax issues with government and others. And basically the reason it carried on was the work and the reputation that Liz already has. As I said, she's very highly respected. She is the person that HM Revenue and Customs talk to about construction matters. They might not always like what she says. They might not always do what she says, but they do listen to what she says. Amongst other things, I think you've been involved in 2 big rewrites of the construction industry scheme. So, and above all else, the reason that she's a good person to talk to, apart from the fact that she's very knowledgeable and authoritative on this, is that she's very business aware. She's very familiar with the realities of running a business in an industry like this. She's human. She's a very good communicator, and also she's good fun. There is nobody I would rather talk about the rights of substitution to than Liz Bridge. So I know you're going to have a very interesting time over the next hour or so, and I'll hand you over to Liz to enlighten us all.
What I don't know is, I can walk anywhere and I won't lock the screen. If I stand here, will I block anybody's view? No, right. I'm going to talk about off-payroll working, and then we might have a 5-minute jump about, and I'll just quickly go over reverse charge VAT. If your heads haven't fallen off after off-payroll working, they surely will on reverse charge VAT. So let's see. It's got a very boring title, off-payroll working. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to anybody. Sorry about the misprint. What does off-payroll working really mean? It is the Inland Revenue looking for people who should be on your payroll and who aren't. If your firm wasn't paying a company, a partnership, an entity for their work, would they really and truthfully be your employee? Is there a chain in place or a disguise in place that's keeping them off your payroll? That's what they're looking for. And it's, in a sense, it's a game. You have to know what the opposition is trying to win. And they're trying to win extra employees onto your payroll. I want you to think back what's happened to us in the last 20 years. There was, about 20 years ago, and for quite a long period of time, a big fight going on between construction and the revenue to move self-employed workers into pay-as-you-earn. You had lots of men that you paid CIS net and who arrived in overalls, possibly with some tools, and who said something on the lines of, "What would you like me to do today, Gov?" The revenue said they were not self-employed, they should be on payroll. They were there to do what you told them with your tools, your materials, and that you should put them in pay-as-you-earn. Large numbers of people in construction found ways round that. Accountants told men to form their own limited company and then to offer their services back to you as a limited company, it would be safe. There were agencies and intermediaries who said to people, "Give me your workforce, I will put them through a magic machine and I will give you your workforce back, but it will be safe. Nobody can challenge on pay-as-you-earn." And there were all sorts of inventions going on. We also in 2008 saw a major recession, and in that recession large numbers of finance directors were told to cut payroll, get rid of everybody, get rid of anybody that's not essential. And large numbers of white collar senior management took early retirement or were made redundant. And what we all have seen is that they come back 2 and 3 days a week as consultants working for their own limited companies, probably doing the job they used to do. But it's nice to be having your pension and having a few days extra. And we have large numbers of consultants who are not consulting widely, they are consulting for one business, maybe 2, conceivably 3, but are really, the revenue would say, possibly disguised employees. And that's what this legislation is looking for. Oh, turned it off. So where did people go? Well, I use George Canning as an example. George Canning formed George Canning Limited. Intermediate agencies supplied you with George Canning Limited. What they were actually giving you was George Canning. And there were there's chains of agencies and intermediaries inserted to disguise the fact that possibly a very ordinary electrician is working for you and you know him well. And he's working side by side with other men doing exactly the same sort of thing, but he works for a limited company and he isn't in payroll. That's the most normal thing I see, is your firm paying George Canning Limited, and actually what you see day to day is a human being. And very often you do actually see Elizabeth Bridge Limited, the name and the person. Sometimes you could guess by, it's Holiday Fund Limited or Gay Works Limited, and you might think there's somebody else there in it, but that's the most normal structure. That's the complicated structure, and that can be whole chains of bodies. On things like Crossrail, one saw agency and intermediary chains that went on 10 businesses long to disguise what was going on. But the vanilla one is the straight line. What I had said to you actually is that this is your talk, and that if I'm saying anything that you disagree with or you don't understand or you want to stop me and buy one, you waggle your hand and we'll talk. You'll get more out of it if you feed back to me and I think about what you're saying, and that you don't have to worry if you say something that you are the only person in the room who's muddled or doesn't understand. You are the only person in the room with the balls to say you don't understand.
On the previous slide, which you might cover later on.
This one?
That one.
Yeah.
So if I've got 20 George Cannings, all with different names coming through that agency.
Yes. Yes.
That agency may have 20 limited personal service companies, if
Yes.
you like, working for them and then supplying
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
That's a more familiar scenario in my business.
Yes. So you pay them and you know that you're getting 20 of them. Right. I'm going to start showing you in a minute who I think you should put on a suspects list and test, because all those human beings, I think, may bear scrutiny.
And I'm probably jumping ahead, but when that agency writes to me and confirms that all 20 of those guys are on an umbrella payroll under PAYE,
Yes.
does that get me off the hook?
I'll come to that. But that's, some of you will have the agency working, some of you won't. So, are you in the frame for the new legislation? And some of you will instantly find you can go home, or you think you can. This new legislation is only going to bite on people with more than 50 employees, or a turnover of more than 10.2 million, or balance sheet assets of 5.1 million. You have to have two of them.
Definition of employee, because what you're saying is George Canning, who's a human being who should be an employee.
Yes.
Should you be counting that as part of the 50, or is it if you already have 50?
If you test people and you find that they should be an employee, you have to count them. I would always say to you, and I'm always saying, be cautious. Don't say to yourself, oh, I've got more than 50 employees, but I don't pass those two tests, so I'm safe. Or I passed those two tests, but I haven't got that. If you pass one of those tests, I would say have a quiet look at what's going on. And I'm also going to say to you, if you know actually she shoved that slide up and you think, I can go home now, I'm safe, stay, because this legislation was started about 3 years ago, and its first run was on government departments and local authorities. And it was so successful that it has been spun out to small, large and medium companies in Britain. It is going to work, and if you're small, you will get it, I think, quite soon. It is as well to know what size of problem you've got. And I'm going to say, compile a list of suspects.
Going back to the previous slide, we've got two subsidiaries, both below 50, in total more than 50.
Yeah.
Do we favour below 50 or above?
I would say to you, look, go ahead, treat it as if it applies to you. Have a look. who are your suspects and who are you in danger with. Because a lot depends on how those subsidiaries work together and what an inspector could argue. If you're talking about one soldier, one man, nobody's going to be interested in you at all. What I don't know is whether you are the biggest electrical company in Britain and it's an artificial fudge. So I can't give you a straight answer. I would say test and see where your problem lies and the extent of your problem.
So on that one, surely if you're a group of companies, you
Yes.
sit at the top of the umbrella and you have to check yourself
Yes.
anyway. So then you'd be realising that in your group you've already got...
Yes. Yes. I would say test for the problem. Always test for the problem. And the first stage is to compile a list of suspects. These are people you are going to test. We'll talk about assess test in a minute. But you want to know who you're going to assess, who you're going to look at. And this is who you're not looking for. If I start at the bottom, people already on your payroll. So you look out at whoever works for you, and if they're on your payroll, you are safe. People who work for you and these are sort of two forms of the same thing. You have subcontracted a project to another business at a price where all you are asking that other business to do is to do it to standard and price, satisfactorily. You do not care who mans it. It is a perfectly straight subcontract. You do not have to look at his men. So, you have completely subcontracted a project. That's his problem, not yours.
What if somebody has given us a price to do a part of a job who has got two subcontractors and they both do the job?
Yeah.
So if they say we'll charge you £5,000 for that part of the job, is that?
Do you care who does it? Do you know who's doing it?
It's going to be these two guys, yes.
Have you asked for them? If they didn't turn up, would you care? If you put two other guys in?
You're guilty.
If you've put a price, if Alpha Beta have given you a price and they're doing something for you, you don't care. You want it done to that price, to the standards, with the materials specified. How they man it is their business. That's perfectly all right. Where you've got a subcontractor where the faces and the skills of the people you barely know, it doesn't. You leave that. That's their business.
So, sorry, on that point, if you then still had an oversight of what was going on that site, because it's obviously an interest that the site is run efficiently.
Yes.
Would that then mean...
No, I mean, let's not fib to ourselves. Where it's a genuine oversight and you're genuinely just watching that your project's done properly, perfectly all right. You'll begin, when I'm starting to look at the suspects, you'll begin to see what you're looking for. Let's go on a bit. Right. Regular faces. You're going to put them on your list of suspects. People who you know. You see a face and you know the name. You know who it is. You know his skill. You know all sorts of things about him. Because actually, he's not a complete stranger to you. I want him on your list of suspects. Anybody that works for your firm who has a business card with your business name on it, or is named on your website. Large numbers of businesses in construction have project managers, estimators, all sorts of people who are consultants, but their business card doesn't say that they are self-employed. They have your name on their business card. Anybody who wears your logos all over their clothes, I want on your list of suspects.
So, for example, when we're out on site,
Yeah.
any subcontractors that work for us
Yes.
have to wear our high-vis
Yes.
branding.
Yes.
But they don't actually work for us, they work for another company. So are they our problem?
That does come up because it's health and safety, isn't it?
They're employed by another subcontractor.
Yes. When you know they're employed by another subcontractor, when you know it is simply for health and safety reasons, I would leave them off.
What I'm trying to establish is it our responsibility to do the CES check on that subcontractor?
No, not when you really don't know those men. But I want you to think about who does wear your clothes and your hats and your logos, because there are large numbers of consultants who do. Now, you're working in an industry, and some of you are at the high end where you're working on electric rail, for example, where, yes, because of the health and safety standards, everybody's got to be immediately identifiable at a distance of 200 yards. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Everest double glazing men who wear Everest, but are not in pay-as-you-earn. They're not, and they're going out in Everest vans with Everest logos. But if somebody's wearing your logos, think about it. Why?
Are they not the face of your business who you have engaged in and you've been engaged by?
Well, I just want them on your list of suspects. Just want them on that list. We're not saying anything about them yet. We're just saying these must be tested, because if you think about it, if there really were inspectors of taxes anymore, and I think actually they're like unicorns, but if there were, they live in the real world and they walk about and they see their neighbours and they talk to people and they live next to building sites. And if you've got men walking around with your logo on them, it will be observed by somebody. Somebody who sits somewhere regularly or attends regularly 1 day a week. Predictable. That's looking at the sort of the white collar men really, but you know that this is Wednesday afternoon, X is in on a Wednesday afternoon. That's X's desk. I want them on your list of suspects. Anybody who somebody else might think was your man. That he goes out and he does not say, I am a self-employed consultant. He talks about your firm and he represents you. Got more suspects, don't worry. Anybody who has no other engager as far as you know, or maybe 1 or 2. Anybody who previously worked for you in pay-as-you-earn and is doing the same-ish job now, even if it's only half a day a week.
And even if it's 20 years ago.
Use your common sense. But even 20 years ago, if they were in pay-as-you-earn and they're doing the same-ish job now out of pay-as-you-earn, as an old inspector of taxes, I could find that quite strange. I could ask.
We have a lot of those.
Yeah. Well, I think you start to think about them. I'm trying to get you to understand the revenues, it's a bit like a lion. who sits looking out at the zebras in the field. And when you are a lion and you look down at the zebras in the field, what you're looking for is the slow ones, the ones that are lame, the ones that have babies with them. You're looking for potential meat that you can bring down. And this is a list, really, of what, when you are doing a check, you'd be looking at and a bit suspicious of. Anyone you've asked to work for your business because you liked them or you knew how skilled they were. Because it suggests to me that there's a personal relationship and you liked them and wanted them. They would go on your list of suspects.
Just on the bullet above,
Yeah.
we've got quite a few where I know that, but I also know he's got 5 or 6 guys working for him within that company.
Right, then you leave them off again. You put them on your list of suspects because what I want you to do is have a list of suspects and then have a column which says why you've taken them off your list. I know him to be paying 5 men. So he's genuinely self-employed. He's bringing me a workforce that I don't care anything about.
So would then the onus fall back
On
on that
him.
individual guy
Yes.
to pay all the...
He's got then the problem as to is he properly employing pay-as-you-earn? Because going back to one of the earlier slides, you're paying eBridge Limited and he brings in 5 men. You don't care which 5 men, you care about the standard of work. So they're not your employees, they couldn't be your employees. You don't care. It could be A one day and B the next. You care about the standard of the contract.
So the differentiator is if you're picking the name of the person that you want, then that is somebody
It
who
sort
shouldn't
of indicates to the lion that there's meat there, or could there be meat there?
And on my eBridge Limited, even though eBridge himself is working...
That doesn't matter because he's a master man in his own right, truthfully. He just happened to have started small and called his company by his own name. But the majority of the eBridge Limited companies have only eBridge and his wife in there. Unfortunately, stupid. Anybody else because you liked them or you knew their skill set? Right, anybody who drives your vehicles is dangerous. Anybody you give holiday pay and allowances to. Anybody you train and pay for the training of. Anybody who comes to your Christmas party. Anybody who, in conversation, when chatting with another that they didn't know but might turn out to be a member of the Inland Revenue staff, says they work for you. I'm not saying that they are your employees. I am saying you must now have them on a list and start thinking about them, because that's how the lion will start looking for meat. Sorry, you have your hand up.
Again, it just goes on the list, but the training, I've been in situations where we've deliberately trained the workforce in our way of health and safety.
Yes.
So again, it's on the list, but then...
But you put it into the margin. This what I did train him, but it was in health and safety for a 3-day course on a particular site. It's not, I take his training very seriously and I keep all his certificates up to date. I laugh, but I have people who phone me who are talking about, is there a problem with somebody who is insured to drive their vehicles and takes their vehicles home? That is a pay-as-you-earn employee if they're given a van.
Does it include laptops, IT equipment, mobile phones?
Yeah.
I would have thought so, because if you sort of say to yourself, I am in business on my own account, and I'm going to price to keep myself in business on my own account. My laptop is a tool of my trade, and I should be pricing to keep myself in my laptop. You know, my prices should be enough to pay my accountant, run my van, keep myself with a laptop and software and a mobile. And if when I'm working for somebody else, they start giving me those things, those are the things that employers give employees. And it's pretty strange. I mean, do other firms, when you subcontract to them, give you vehicles and laptops and software? Not usually. There might be exceptional reasons, but I would say put them on your list. You know, it's like the Gilberts, have a little list, and because it's a list of suspects, it's not going to count for anything. It's going to give you a basic check of what the scale of your problem is and what the answers are. And you're going to be able to demonstrate to the revenue that you did do a check. You knew the legislation, thought about it, put your names down sensibly, you had your list of suspects, you checked them. And you don't really want them to be able to come along and say, well, there's some names on this list you gave computers to, or mobile phones. So have them on, yes, have them on your list.
So you could invoice them for any training, and they pay that. If you're doing something that...
Why are they not training themselves?
Pricing.
Sorry?
You might be able to get it cheaper as a company.
You could, yeah, that might be the answer. But
why are you picking on that benefit for just that one person? Because it's now, they're no longer just anybody can turn up. You're now saying that that person has to turn up because I've trained them.
I just think if you're paying for training, you ought to have them on your list of suspects and test them. Because it's odd to pay for somebody else's training. Who's in business. Yeah. Well, or why would they bill you for their training? It would be in their price, surely, if they're genuinely self-employed.
Our man George Canning turns up and he's an approved electrician. He starts, we say we've got 6 months work for you on a day work basis. Come along to site, he gives us his UTR, we put it through CIS system, verifying. HMRC has had the opportunity to, if they want to, deduct 30% off him, but they just choose to come back and verify and say lower rate, so deduct 20%.
That counts for nothing.
So, but my point is that the revenue and customs had the opportunity to tax him up to 30%.
No, they don't. They can only tax him up to 30% if he has no UTR.
Yeah.
They can't, and they can't verify him.
Yeah.
So it's not a choice thing on their part. He either has a UTR or he doesn't. Yeah. And if he doesn't, he's taxed at 30, and if he does, he's taxed at 20. Yeah. But he is taxed at 20 because he is self-employed.
Yeah.
And you, as the employer, are the only person that can judge that, not the revenue, because they don't know the terms and conditions he's working on.
Yeah.
And if he isn't self-employed, there is a vast amount of missing national insurance contribution. And that's what they're after. And truthfully, that's what you're after and he's after, is not paying it. That's,
So CIS is a red herring.
CIS is a red herring.
But surely it goes back, when you talk about the last 15, 20 years in this industry, sure it goes back to the 7.0 a
So
criteria that was always, is it an employer or is it a
Yes.
self-employed individual?
Yes.
And it's nothing different to what you're
Not
presenting
really.
today.
No, it's
And
not
people
really.
have been scooting around that for years.
Yes,
It's just everything's digital and it's easy to
it's
find.
it. Yes.
Well, there lies another problem.
And in a
because
way-
the revenue have got us by the short and curlies with the
What one
information.
had was people disappearing down the rabbit hole of a limited company, and the revenue couldn't and didn't challenge
Well,
it.
they didn't, though.
They didn't,
Yeah,
when they
didn't.
should have. You know, I couldn't go to Marks and Spencer's and say, could I have a job on the tills? And then them say, yes, you're till trained, you look ideal to us. And then I say, and I'm my own limited company, so don't put me in pay as you earn, just pay me. We'd all know there was a rat. We could all smell the rat there. But in construction, we have people who come along to be a scaffolder. And they're not put in pay as you earn because they are eBridge Limited. But they are a scaffolder. They are an electrician. When you were to look at them side beside colleagues, they are doing the same thing as colleagues in pay as you earn very often. They are indistinguishable.
Apart from that, the subcontractors are paid more.
A slightly more, but pays no national insurance contribution.
Yeah. So
But
their rates are higher. So
Yes.
it's comparable all rate. So the electrician 1592 or whatever it is. And the
Yes,
subby's on 22,
and that is
22.
possibly because the employer doesn't have to pay national insurance contribution and therefore can afford a slightly higher rate, and the worker doesn't have to pay national insurance contribution, so can afford a little lower rate. But
Where's the cutoff? So this guy, Mr. Canning's come, he's worked for 6 months, but actually it turns out he's only going to work for us for a week. Do we have to employ him, when he does his induction, do we have to pay him PAYE for a day? Do we do it for a week? Do we do it for a year?
Right.
Do we do it,
the strict answer
Yeah.
is, just like the lady that arrived at Marks and Spencer's to run the tills, it isn't that you run the tills for a week and can be self-employed for a week. If you arrive to do what you are told with somebody else's kit and machinery, and you don't bring other men with you, you should go into pay as you earn. However, what we all know is the truth, is that if you were to only come for 3 days, no inspector would fight about it because the amount of money is too small. What I am scared about for you all is you think, oh, it's all right, it's only 3 days, I can push it. Then he comes back for 3 weeks. Then he comes back for 3 months, and then you have him forever. And you never started the pattern properly.
It's about being honest with yourself, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you need an electrician, employ an electrician.
Yes.
The rule
You know,
of thumb.
and one of the things you do with the list of suspects is, when you look at it, yes, you're all going to try and smudge off people and fib to the revenue. Everybody's going to have a go at certain people are going to be smudged through, but don't lie to yourself. Know what the dangers are and who's dangerous. Don't fail at the first hurdle of putting the suspects on the list.
Surely, Liz, if people were to go back and look at, because of the reporting to the HMRC these days is so joined up,
Yes.
where it wasn't 5 years ago, and surely that's their best tool at the moment. So surely if people went back and actually looked how they were reporting those that were working for them, they'd have a bloody good idea
Yes.
of the repetition of people
Yes.
who are working for them and quite where they fit.
Yes.
It's not difficult, is it?
No. You know, if it was only 3 days, ever, then nobody'd know. But the truth that underlies your industry is that you have very technical work to do to a very high standard. You get the men in and find that they can do that, and you want to use them. You do not want to get a Wally off the street you've never used before. You want the men you know are competent, and then they become repeat statistics. Right, so what we're going to do, we've got this awful list of suspects. Why are they dangerous? What is the danger to this legislation? The legislation that comes into force puts the responsibility for pay as you earn, if it is not collected somewhere in the chain, on the person using the worker. So if you've used the worker, the responsibility for that pay as you earn, if it's unpaid, will lie with you forever. The revenue can always, if they find that up in the chain it's not being paid, they look for who was using the worker and they come for the pay as you earn. That's why it bites. It bites because, you know, the whole chain tells you it's operating pay as you earn, but it isn't. The revenue can come to you. How far do you risk the truth in the chain?
So in that process,
Yep.
the man in the bowler hat visits George Canning, says you should have been paying income tax, and he was working for me and I haven't paid it either. You don't go for him first and then
No.
come to me.
No.
Just come straight to me.
You are the person that pays the limited company. You have failed to operate pay as you earn. They come to you. Let us say there's a great raft of agencies. Actually, you're at the top, you use the man, then there's this chain. No pay as you earn came out of the chain. The revenue say, you used the man, the pay as you earn's due from you. You haven't quantified that. Right? If we go back to what happened when they tried this legislation with government departments and local authorities, you have finance officers working for government departments and local authorities who are employees, beautifully trained, very responsible men. They know that there's a chain before they get their white collar workers in. You know, the head of the deputy head of funeral services is actually a consultant. He was the employee, he's now working part-time as a consultant. They panic because if somebody comes and says this pay as you earn hasn't been paid, there is a vast debt owed by the local authority to the revenue, and whose job is on the line for unquantified debts that have emerged for pay as you earn. It's true really of the finance officers of all big businesses. They are scared that they're building a debt that they know nothing of, that they cannot control. If you've got George Canning working for George Canning Limited and then there's you, what you know is you've got to apply pay as you earn if he fails a cess test. It's where there's a chain that you start to have a worry.
So we're employed by building company X, and they've employed us as a limited company. George Canning works for us as a limited company, hasn't paid PAYE. We haven't paid his PAYE. So is it their responsibility?
Yes. Well, the revenue will run up. The first layer of responsibility is with the person that pays George Canning Limited. That's called the fee payer.
Mm-hmm.
But if the fee payer has failed, and what actually happens is, of course, the fee payer fails and disappears, the liability goes back to the person who has used George Canning.
So it works its way down the food chain, basically.
Or up the food chain. And what we can all guess about the chains of intermediaries and limited companies is that when there is a pay-as-you-earn debt, they have nothing to pay it. They are men of straw and will disappear faster than...
This is the real concern to us, is that I'm being offered fail-safe solutions from agencies whereby I'm not taking any risk because they'll do the due diligence, they'll do the assessment and so on and so forth, and they will only supply me labour that they've tested and are either in or out of scope, and it will all stand up to revenue inspection and yada yada yada. And they've offered me insurance products against that, which
You have to pay for.
yeah.
Yes.
But my nervousness, as you
Yes.
said, is that in the event that that company, however big it is, 3 years down the line is hit with a revenue bill they can't pay,
Yes.
they end up coming to me. Because they...
And that's why this legislation is so powerful, because it's got incredibly nasty, frightening teeth. And that's why when they used it against the government departments and local authorities, what they actually saw was that the chains just dissolved and people took their workers back into pay-as-you-earn because they didn't dare sweat it out. And I can't answer you that question because only you can look at the chains below you and think, how far do I trust these men? And how far are these chains of companies, have they got the assets to pay settlements? Or are they bright young men who take every single drop of money out in remuneration so that when the shit hits the fan, they're gone? And they can talk big, but you're the firms with an office, with assets, with directors, with invested shareholding capital. The agencies are often two bobs, really. If push came to shove, they could move on to do other things.
So you get hit twice. You probably pay the agency for doing the work for you, and then have to pay for the.
Well, you just have, there may be agencies out there that are genuine and sensible and do it. The insurance policies may work. In my other life, I work as a judge in the first tier tax tribunal, and I sit as an independent judge, and I see people who are arguing with the revenue about tax avoidance schemes. And when people buy into a tax avoidance scheme, generally speaking, it's been designed by an accountant, and it goes to a QC, a very posh barrister, who says things like, this is guaranteed, this will work, I believe this will work. And then the accountants give the taxpayer who buys in a guarantee that they'll take it to the highest court in the land. And it fails, and everybody disappears. And the barrister, of course, has been paid for his advice, and it was wrong. There you are. That's it. Be careful of all these wonderful guarantees.
Sorry, Liz. Just to jump in, if that was a main contractor employing a subcontractor, for fear you'd gone bust and disappeared, you'd be asked for PI insurance. So insurance is the only answer you can get. If an agency doesn't exist anymore, they could get insurance against that risk. Once you've got it for that year of coverage, you get it just as you have to do when you do PQQ lists or anything else. You get a copy of that, you lodge it, buy them all if you like. Just as your barrister's PI would be on record, so if the barrister had died and disappeared, you would sue his PI for that.
No, but barristers don't give the sort of advice that can be sued for, actually.
Put enough caveats in front.
Yeah. Sorry.
Recognising the chain is made of straw, what recourse does the fee payer have under this legislation to go after the chain? None.
Well, Rob will legally advise you as to what the chain was legally contracted to do.
You mean if you can sue somebody below you?
That way it's more awkward, isn't it?
Above you.
Why should I be
Main
paying
contractor.
if it's the people above me who actually avoided paying the tax?
Yes, except they'll have,
You've got to put onto your price, haven't you?
they'll have done a cess test because the person is on the list of suspects. They will have told you on the cess test this person fails, you must put them in pay as you earn. And you've said yes, you have.
No, I'm talking about just the general one where we believe that they're doing it properly. They're not. The revenue comes to me. I end up having to pay
Well,
the tax.
I would like you to have at least a letter from them saying they've done it properly. And, right, if they were doing it properly, you at the moment, you pay £100 for the use of, which goes to an agency, which goes to Canning Limited, which goes to Canning. And there is no national insurance in there, okay? So you might expect that the man at the bottom could have £95 out. Right. Pay as you earn has got to be applied by the fee payer. Now, you're going to pay £100. The fee payer has got to pay employers and employees national insurance contribution. So George at the bottom is only going to be getting about £70. He will squeal. And I would expect him to squeal back up the chain and say, I don't like this, what's happening? I want the rates to go up. Or I want to come into pay as you earn. You know, what's the point of this infinitely long chain when I'm standing in your yard every day? I'll come in. But if he says nothing about his rate of take-home pay going from 90 to 70, I'd be deeply suspicious that nobody's coming back to you and asking you for more money. Because what you've got is the revenue in that chain taking, for the £100, taking 24, 25 out. Everybody's very short of cash now down there. Why are they sitting silent? They don't mind having that much money gone. You've got a big mouth, you've got the Inland Revenue's mouth gobbling up money in there. So if you say to somebody, I've tested them, they're in pay as you earn, you must apply pay as you earn, you're the fee payer, and they say, all right, that's fine, we've applied pay as you earn, go on paying us the same amount of money, I would start waking up in the night with an ulcer.
But what would HMRC do about that situation?
Well, they are not getting their pay as you earn, so they'd be coming back to you when they found it out.
I think the crux of it comes down to, again, it's about being honest. If you need electricians, you need to be employing electricians, and agency labour, although it was great for 20 years, isn't the way that we can do it going forward, and it's just the bills.
Unless it is very temporary.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's for a week.
Yes, and then in a way, that it's not you can argue it's not an employee because you didn't really care who you got. You wanted him to a certain standard. But you didn't care that it was John or Kevin. It had to be somebody qualified to grade whatever. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We're a tier 2 contract, and most working for a tier 1 contractor. And what you said there is, obviously, we give a price for a fixed price for doing, say, schedule rates.
Yes.
I know myself, my tier 1 contract now, have all sat around the room and had their IR35 briefing, and they're sitting there quite happily because they know that all responsibility sits with the tier 2 contractors.
Yes.
So they are still after their best price, right? So then it's against the tier 2 contractors who are then being ethical and employing their labour force then really. So it's either market to be or market not to be, really, isn't it? Because if you've got, I'm not much to explain myself very well, but we're in a marketplace where my competitors are, like, got 30 guys out there, all limited companies, and don't pass the test, and we take we've got a mixture of both, so then we have to take our subcontractors on the cards.
Yes.
I then can't compete in that marketplace. But as far as my tier 1 contractor goes, he's sitting there pretty.
Yes.
He has absolutely no responsibility whatsoever.
You're in the at the point where you need to write an anonymous letter to the revenue to say, actually, I know all his subcontractors.
Yeah, you can't.
But surely at the end of the day, what's going to happen if this goes ahead and it potentially has the it's going to bring down a huge amount of people in the construction industry, not me, but a lot of people in this industry, and we'll see how that goes. But if they do go ahead with it, which they've stopped other schemes in time gone by because of damage limitation, but if it does go ahead, then ultimately there's going to be a very hard period for some who have committed to low rates for the period ahead.
Yes.
But eventually, those of us who always wanted that thing called a level playing field will come about, and ultimately we will all rejoice in the fact that the client, the end user, will actually have to pay what he wants to pay for, i.e. a professionally trained workforce. And personally, what do you do?
I can't get you through the transition, and I can't get you through the competitive disadvantage of being clean when you compete against people who are dirty. And unfortunately, I don't think our revenue is very well staffed, so it will take a while to find the firms that go on paying 100 George Canning Limiteds. But they are not impossible to find with modern technology. You know, we used to work in a world where people couldn't be found, and you could do all sorts of things because other people had to hunt through paper records. We're moving very fast away from that. And George Canning Limited will have a CIS record. If he's paid self-employed, he will have a CIS record and it will show one engager. And that will be odd when that engager has 20 men, all with CIS records, and, for example, doesn't buy any materials. There's all sorts of things with agencies where you think, well, what is this person, what is this business doing? Because it's got no materials in there. So it's supplying men. Well, how is it doing that when there's no pay as you earn? It's not beyond rocket science. It probably is beyond the revenue this year. So you have got to do your list of suspects. You have got to start moving, knowing the problem, and knowing that you mustn't get the problem growing. You must get it reducing. That's all I can say. And that's why it's dangerous. Is you're going to be sitting on a problem.
So what we're really saying is that they've got to find a short and curly.
Yes.
And it's the death of the self-employed.
It's not the death throw of genuine self-employment, but it, you know, if you are an electrician who works locally, and one week you're doing, rewiring my garage, and another week you're working for you, and the next week you find another, that's perfectly all right. That person is self-employed.
That's going to be far and few between now.
But you, as an industry, and I don't mean you, but as an industry, construction employers start sitting there thinking, my workload varies, fluctuates, and I like flexibility. That was always the word that used to make me giggle in my heart. I like flexibility. I like to be able to take men and lay them off, take them and lay them off. That actually does not mean that those people are self-employed. They're at no risk. The risk they're at is it'll snow and they won't get paid, or the man that currently engages them, can't get any more work and they're laid off. But they are servants when they're working for you. You buy the materials, you tell them how the materials are to be done, you engage them because they are of a certain quality. You engage other people to help them, to sweep up after them, to stand at the other end of a piece of wire. They're servants. They're not self-employed.
The concept that's difficult to get across to the operators, not so much the finance departments who will be held to account, is that I do the CEST, I declare the guys inside IR35, the people who are paying, the fee payer says, yeah, we agree, we're paying him that way. I accept your point that why hasn't his rate gone up, but the guys realise it's the end of the gravy train and has to start paying tax like us. And then revenue comes in, finds that they haven't done that, and I still pick up the tab.
That is why the revenue...
I've been compliant.
I know.
I've done what revenue wants me to do, but I still get stiffed at the end.
Yes, which is why this legislation
What
works so
revenue
wonderfully well.
wants you to do, revenue wants you to employ that person and not go to an agency. That's what FI
Because
does.
when and I'll start in a minute talking about how you apply pay as you earn to a payment to a limited company, which may have VAT on it. It's hideous. It's it's not a natural thing to be doing, applying pay as you earn to the payment to a limited company.
Which is an organisation won't do. What we're saying is if you are in scope, you come on my payroll or you go on somebody else's payroll.
Yeah.
And prove it.
It's worth remembering when we did the Brexit guidance for ECA Members, the average contractor employed 65% of his workforce. Just 35% is getting from agency or self-employed. It's a huge amount. And if you look for IT sectors, what they've done prior to Christmas is just sacked all these self-employed people that were previously, the last 20 years, employed IR35 employment status. They just got rid of them. All the banking sectors just wholesale got rid of them.
Just to add that, geographically there's a variation, and we're sitting in the middle of London, and I think the latest stats that I saw, London construction sites, 90% of operatives at the moment operate as self-employed, and I imagine that probably reflects, certainly on the big jobs. The big jobs in London, the electrical jobs, that's probably a million miles away.
And equally, the banking sector has the margins and the reserves
Yes.
to enable them to get rid of people and start
Yes. Yes.
But they were looking for an insurance security. Some of the issues you've raised about liveries and kind of branded clothing, etc. You get that on certain projects, as Liz said. Get careful, you work outside, you're mostly going to end up in a certain type of livery. But that will be in the contract as a specific requirement. Health and safety training, you raised that. That's a specific requirement for the site or the nature of the project. So it will go in the contract. It evidences that this is a business-to-business arm's length relationship, not an IR35 scam. And that's really what, if you take away anything from what this has said so far, it's all about evidencing that you've checked it, and that this is genuine.
So presumably because of the people involved, it's going to affect right the way up the food chain to our main contractors, who we all know their own management on sites of.
I know, for example, that Ove Arab have got rid of large numbers of their consultants. Mark MacDonald have got rid of large numbers of their consultants, and then, in a sense, they then offer pay as you earn to whoever they want back. But the big names who have a profit margin have seen the writing on the wall and know they have that it's the levels of danger for them are unacceptable. But you're all trading in with a much smaller margin, so it's much scarier to you. But if somebody says that they have applied pay as you earn and there is no message back up the chain about the rates, I myself would feel slightly frightened.
I mean, have the revenue, presumably they've done an exercise to the, I mean, I think it's a good thing, personally, but have they done an exercise to see the damage, the potential damage that it will do to the construction industry, because it is invariably going to cause an absolute nightmare for a huge proportion of top to tail in the industry because of what everyone said the percentages are.
I suspect they've done the exercise which demonstrates
How much money they'll get in.
Well, and absolutely, and yeah, no,
Yes. And in a sense, what they will say also to themselves is that the companies who currently employ 95% of their workforce and have 5% of their workforce as consultants will be hurt a tiny amount. The people that have everybody as George Canning Limited will be devastated, and do we care?
They're on the moral high ground. It's not going to lose political votes.
No.
They work for the taxpayer.
Yes. Yes.
So if we have someone, does the revenue care if they're an employee, or can they still be a self-employed worker and be deducted PAYE? Or does the revenue care as long as they get the PAYE, what status we give them? So there's a difference between an employee and a self-employed worker.
This is employment status for employment rights purposes rather than employment
Right.
status.
If you
for
deduct
tax.
pay as you earn, the person that right. If a person is, oh, I know what question you're asking me, and it's the last slide. Hang on, and we'll get there. Right. Yeah.
Jumping ahead. Apologies.
Right. So the law works that the buck rests with your firm if no pay as you earn is applied by the fee payer. But you are probably the fee payer in most cases because you're probably the person that pays George Canning Limited, who pays George Canning. So you've got your list of suspects. And if you're going to take anybody off that list of suspects, you're going to write, I've trained this person 3 days in health and safety only, or they wear my logo because it's a requirement of National Rail that the whole project wears this logo. But there is this thing called the CEST test, which you find online. When you find it online, remember it's anonymous, so you can actually look at it. You can try people through it. And when you start to play with it, as I say that, you all giggle because we all know what we're thinking. On the first runs, answer the questions truthfully. The worst person to trick is yourself. You have to know the truth. You might do the questions a second time and footle around with them a little, but on the first run you answer truthfully because you want to know the true scale of your problem. It might be that you think you have problems, and what actually comes up is that this person is self-employed. There are surprising answers that come out of the CEST test, but don't fib to it on the first pass. It's anonymous, you're only cheating yourself.
I did one the other week, and even they didn't know. It
Yeah.
says, we don't know, contact the revenue.
Yeah.
Must be, depending on which way you go down the chain. Isn't
But
it?
if you get an answer out of it that says this person or this contract is one of self-employment, you go back in and you put the names in and you print it out and you staple it to the back of your test sheets because you have done a test sheet and you have done the thing correctly and you have evidence that you've done it correctly and you're safe on that person.
Sorry, and is that linked into the database that the revenue have got?
No.
No, it's not.
No,
Okay.
but it means that should anybody make an inquiry of you, you say, I went to this talk, I have my list of suspects, I have my file, here you are, I list my suspects, and I tested these people, and on the back you'll see I printed. The only challenge they could make to you then is that some of the answers you gave were lies. But actually, lions run away and try and bring down easier meat than people who say, I've got a file, I went to a course, I did this, and I tested this. Honestly, that's going to be a very long battle to run. Better to go to all your competitors who say, what do you mean off payroll working? Much easier. Be honest. Log it if it says it doesn't apply. If it says it does apply, you have to. You are then thinking, do I go back and fudge the questions, and always know that I have fudged the questions and know how I fudged the questions, or do you tell the chain, I want pay as you earn to apply? If you are paying the limited company, you are going to apply the pay as you earn to the payment out. If it's an intermediary, you're going to tell down the chain that you want pay as you earn to apply, or you will be applying pay as you earn to the payment. And then you wait and you see what happens. But you don't sit on your hands about it. So your firm becomes the fee payer if you're paying the limited company that pays the human being. And you've got to find out what these chains are. They're the fee payer, you tell the fee payer, he must apply pay as you earn.
But we're still at risk.
Sorry? But you are still at risk, and will always be at risk, because this may be a man of straw who may be lying to you.
It's just a shame the tier one contractors can't sit there as well, isn't it?
Yes, but the worker isn't pay as you earn for them. They hardly know him. Right. I've got a slide which says, what if you receive a notice? I don't think you... Are any of you running agencies? But if you receive a notice because your men are working for somebody else and they've done a CES test and they think pay as you earn should apply, you have to find out whether you are the fee payer, whether you've got the payment to the limited company, and if you aren't, you pass the message down the chain.
Just asked if there used to be a 12-week rule if you've got casual agency labour. Is that finished now?
I think that's a bit like saying there used to be unicorns.
Yeah.
Possibly true, possibly not, I don't know. But it's not current. So if you receive a notice, if you're the fee payer, you apply pay as you earn. If you're not the fee payer, you keep the notice going down. But know that you two are at risk, that everybody in a chain has some part of a risk if pay as you earn isn't applied. Right, if you receive a notice, an employment status determination, and do nothing, you become the fee payer, you become legally responsible for deducting pay as you earn, and you remain responsible until the message is passed on. The client passes the employment status to the agency, who passes it to the intermediary, who passes it to the party who pays the workers, personal service company. It always reminds me of the king asked the queen for a slice of butter for butter for his bread, and the king asked the queen, and the queen asked the dairymaid, and the dairymaid asked the cow, and the cow said certainly. You've got to just keep these messages passing on if you're in a chain. Right, if you are the fee payer. So, you calculate the direct payment to account for employment taxes. You deduct those taxes. You pay the employer's national insurance contribution. and you can't use your employment allowance, but that's because you've got 50 people working for you, you probably couldn't use it anyway. Reporting using RTI and applying the apprenticeship levy. So it is straight pay as you earn. It doesn't matter when the work was done if it's a payment after the 1st of April. Actually, I think that's an old slide and that's wrong. But honestly, the change of year won't matter. Right, the lady's question here. Let us say that this payment has got VAT on it. Yes, it's a subcontract payment, even though it's for one worker, it's got VAT on it. You strip off the VAT. If he is providing materials, you can pay the materials gross. You strip off the materials. You can deduct any expenses that he's incurred that would have been deductible if he'd been an employee. That is almost certainly none. Be careful. You can't pay home to work travelling to an employee free of tax. You couldn't pay it to him. So you would take the VAT off, you would take materials off if there were any, you would take any expenses off if there were any qualifying for an employee. If there's nothing left, there's no deemed direct payment, you would apply pay as you earn to what's left. You would then add back the materials and the VAT. It's a complete mess.
Materials, I mean, anything we get from the employee, we justify it.
To be honest, it's part of the revenues explanation as to what you do. If somebody was providing you with materials, they would probably pass a CES test. So they wouldn't be in this position. But let us say they have failed a CES test and then one day they're working and they run out of materials and they go to B&Q and buy some and you're going to refund them. You could refund them.
Well, I'm thinking, if you're paying the employer's national insurance, you'd be daft to have half a dozen intermediaries between you and the manager.
Yes.
They're all putting add-on costs that are costing you a big
Yes.
So you might as well just employ a man directly.
Yes. There are, just wait a minute, because there are some advantages. But just let me get there. So that's what you do. And actually, technically, for those nerds who want to know, is you've got your payroll, and I would recommend within your payroll, you set up a different department in your own payroll to keep your clean employees' payroll clean, and have a separate department subset for your limited companies, because they're going to be a screw up, and you want to be able to make sure that your payroll, or your proper payroll, always works. You would always use a starter declaration C. You would mark that it was an irregular payment pattern. Your payment frequency, which you're asked about, should match as far as possible, and when they leave you would issue a P45. That gives a BR, a basic rate coding on the payment. So there is a sort of coding that runs with this. If you actually, yes, of course you do.
So basically, the travelling, you want to do P11D covering.
If you're giving benefits to somebody, they are undoubtedly, they are undoubtedly an employee. And I would get them out of this system and put them straight into Pucker, pay as you earn. This system is a complete mess.
You're saying you deduct the expenses, but you're paying your expenses to and from because...
You can't deduct expenses to and from work because it's not allowable.
If you're paying them, because...
You would pay, you would...
You've got to put it down to P11D benefit.
No, they pay as you earn on it. I thought you were talking about giving them a company car. No. if you're paying their expenses to and from work, that's taxable, because you couldn't do that for an employee.
Can you have people just sitting, so you set up a separate division within your payroll to have these non-employees
Yes.
who are there for the tax and NI basis. Can you have them just sitting on them? So they come for 6 weeks, they disappear for 2 months, they come back for 6 weeks. Can they just sit on your payroll?
Yes.
You have to issue them a P45 or terminate them.
Well, that's like, there are employees that do that. You know, for example, if you're running a hotel and you have catering staff, you'll have people coming and going in pay as you earn. And you don't give them a P45, you leave them as just with a black, with a...
They hit your head count.
Yes. Right, so is it worth the hassle? That's where you're going to have to think. You've got national insurance back in the mix. Even if you're not the fee payer has got to apply pay as you earn, and has got to pay employers' national insurance contribution, and has got to deduct employees' national insurance contribution. So the George Canning, who previously you paid £100 to an agency who paid George Canning Limited. Say the agency took a £5 and George Canning Limited got 95. They will have done all sorts of bobs and whistles where they'll have had a bit of expenses for toilet rolls and flower arrangements. The tax will be quite small and the national insurance will be self-employed national insurance. Will be employed national insurance, but you take the money out as director's remuneration and dividends. So you minimise the national insurance. National insurance is now back into the mix on the full amount of money. So George Canning's take-home pay goes right down. He won't be happy.
Sorry, are you suggesting there that the company at the top stops the national employers' national insurance, deducts that from what you were paying down?
Well, let's say you're paying somebody for this whole raft. That amount of money that you're paying has got to pay employers and employees in that chain, which was never previously there. So in every £100, they're about £24 short from what they previously had. The agency still will want its turn, and the answer is that the man at the bottom gets much less take-home pay, because there just isn't the money in the chain. So if you tell the chain, this man has failed the CIS test, I want you to apply pay as you earn. If the message that comes back to you is, okay, fair enough, we're doing it, I want you to start developing an ulcer. Because the man at the bottom's take-home pay has gone from £95 to probably about 70, and I would have expected him to murmur at the very least and want more money out of the chain. I would expect that message to go down and an immediate message to come back, probably of 4-letter words. If it's totally silent, I would fear that pay as you earn wasn't in there actually, because it's all so yummy scrummy that they can all afford to pay another £24 to the revenue and nobody say anything. It's odd. So just as you start to work it, think about it. He'll want more take-home pay because suddenly he's got less take-home pay than he's ever had. If you are paying intermediaries to get him, what are you paying them for? What are they delivering to you that you want to pay for.
These people that you're putting into PAYE, will they be subject to company pension scheme?
Oh, right, hang on.
Sorry.
There we are. You will not be responsible for student loan payments, holiday pay, statutory payments, or auto-enrolment. But George Canning, at the bottom, the worker, is suddenly paying getting take-home pay with full pay-as-you-earn taken out of it. And he can't have the expenses he used to have in his limited company. And he is in a job where he does what he's told. He's on the same take-home pay as other people doing the same job, but they have those. He's not a happy bunny. As it starts to work out, I suspect that George Canning will be coming to you saying, could you offer me the same work in pay as you earn? Because if I've got to pay national insurance contribution and have a take-home pay reduced, I want what goes with the ticket.
We can refuse that as long as we're paying their tax and national insurance.
Yes, and he can walk away.
That's what they're arguing, that they are an employee
They haven't employment. They haven't employment rights. But they have to pay as you earn has to be applied in the chain. So you can finish the chain, and they can finish the chain.
Those only apply if you're not responsible if it's a limited company as well.
If you're paying a limited company, if you're like the lady in the middle who's just paying an ordinary man,
then he's back in.
yes.
That's what he's going to do. He's going to say, I've foregone the limited companies. I only
Yes.
set up to stay out of R35 in the first place.
Yes.
Sorry, just one. Sorry, got a question about the thresholds.
Yeah.
The agency turn around and say, we're below the thresholds of
No. You're the tester. It applies to you. You're the person with the liability. The legislation says anybody above these thresholds that has use of a man from a limited company carries the pay-as-you-earn risk.
Sorry, so we're deducting tax, employers' national insurance from our payment out of George Canning Limited.
Yes.
Because he's a limited company. Because that is still a limited company, that's going to have to pay corporation tax.
Yes.
So does he then, he's now paid PAYE, employees' national insurance and corporation tax. Does he get an offset or is this an extra
No,
tax?
it's not an extra tax. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what he does to get the thing sorted out. IR35 legislation means he should have paid pay as you earn on 95% of the money coming in, but often they didn't. So there'll be set-offs. The revenue have a binding obligation never to tax any of us twice. But it's not a good place to be. You know, you're paying an accountant's fees for a limited company that was set up to deliver you from national insurance contribution. And it's not delivering you from national insurance contribution. And you also had better rates of expenses, and it's not giving you that either. Why are you paying an accountant? Why have you got the hassle and the worry of corporation tax returns? Why are you working on somebody's site without holiday pay and without auto-enrolment? You know, what we saw when it was imposed on local authorities and government departments was all this that I'm teaching you about how to operate pay as you earn is a cosmetic exercise. The whole thing implodes. There's very few people who like being a victim of national insurance contributions without holiday pay and auto enrolment. And there's very few employers who really like the risk of the chains below them leaving them high and dry.
Sorry, so George Canning Limited inside IR35, so he turns around, so we have to start taking his tax and national insurance contributions and we start paying employers' national insurance.
You're paying George Canning Limited.
Yes.
You are the fee payer.
Yeah.
You are the person that applies pay as you earn.
Yeah. So that's fine, I get that. So George Canning decides actually I'm going to ditch the limited.
Yeah.
And he's CSI registered, but because we've already declared him inside 35 as an employee, we still have to pay PAYE.
Well, he'd come back to you on a totally different contract.
But would he become an employee?
Probably, because probably you want him to do the work that he always did.
Yeah.
And when you last tested it, he was an employee.
Okay, so if they're not a limited company and we do the CES test and they're declared inside IR35, we therefore...
If they're not a limited company,
yeah.
IR35 has nothing to do with anything.
Okay, so because this is what I'm saying, we've got men
Ordinary men.
who are CIS registered,
Yes.
so they pay their the 20% through the CIS scheme.
Yes.
Can they just remain
They're
as they
effectively
are?
obsolete, aren't they?
That you have to. You have had a long problem that you have failed, that you haven't known about. In that you've got the problem that lots of other people in the room had 20 years ago, and because it was a problem, they used intermediaries.
The reason I'm new to the construction industry. I've only worked
Yes.
about 3
Yeah.
months, so I've inherited this problem.
Yes, but you know, large numbers of people used intermediaries to try and avoid that problem. Large numbers
we
of
don't use intermediaries.
No.
We have them direct
Yes.
to us. So we take the 20% off their invoices and pay that to
Yes.
fee. But what we should do now, they should all come onto our payroll. Onto
You
our
should
books,
certainly
get all the
test them.
Employee benefits and all that kind of stuff.
You should certainly test them as to whether they're employees, because you sound rather like Marks and Spencer's saying, actually, we've got lots of cashiers and they're all self-employed. And actually, that's a bit gig, you know.
It's because what you're telling me contradicts what someone else has told me. So I'm trying to get it clear in my head so I can go back to the directors and say, well, actually, they are a problem. They're not
They are a problem. It may be that he knows something I don't know. Like, I don't know what he knows. But, you know, where a man appears in working clothes at your gate on a Monday morning and he is not carrying anything, maybe a screwdriver or normal tools, and he asks what to do with what is effectively your contract, your goods, your materials, your risk, he is not at risk. You are going to measure, for example, his hours and do a multiplier on...
Yeah, no, I understand. What I'm trying to understand is that with the limited company, they can remain a limited company if they so wish, and we will still deduct tax and national insurance. Where they're not a limited company, we can't just deduct the tax and national insurance if they fall inside IR35. We have to then take them on.
They are an employee.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get
Yes,
to. So
they
holidays,
are.
sickness.
Yeah, they're an employee.
Can I ask a question? What happens if they work under a risk and reward system?
I don't know what a risk and reward system is.
Like they go in and they're given a price to do a job.
Yes.
And obviously they're only paid for that amount of what they put in. It used to apply years ago, there was a risk and reward situation.
I think you have to do a CEST test on them. Because I can't tell you the answer to that without, there's all sorts of parts of the contract they'll be on. You do the CEST test, you see what the answer is, and you follow it.
The other question as well, who determines their tax code? Themselves?
Actually, when you're paying a limited company, it's a BR code.
A BR?
It's a basic rate code. And then that will be the tax that's paid to the tax office. The company will do a corporation tax return, the person will do a self-assessment return, and the tax can be set off. But it's
only really
it's really weird and horrible. Sorry?
24%.
A BR code, somebody else in the room will know. 25. Yeah.
Sorry, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. So if it's back to the agency, and you assess, the agency say they're not taking pay as you earn, so you, as the primary person, have to take the pay as you earn. Would you be paying, you're not paying that person through the agency, or are you paying the agency through pay as you earn?
Well, you've told the agency that you wish them to be. Well, they won't come back and say they're not taking it because they are obliged to take it. Like
So
saying,
they say we're not taking pay as you earn.
you say I'm not using you.
Right. Well, so you would then be obliged to take pay as you earn.
Once you've told them that this person has failed assess test and that the fee payer must be told to apply pay as you earn, the fee payer must apply pay as you earn, and you must be confident they're doing so. That's where the scary bit is, because the risk runs with you.
Because if they fail to do it, or if they go bust,
Yes, you're still liable. Always you're still liable. So, you know, it's no good, you know, if they say to you, oh, I'm not going to do it.
It's either going to be a yes or no.
Yeah. You just don't use that agency. Sorry. But, you know, I cannot continue like this. Right.
There have been a number of the umbrella companies that have done that. They've stopped taxing national insurance on employees, and they're sent off,
Yes.
run it for a period, and then just shut up.
Just disappeared. That's where I think the best guidance lies, is there. Once you've got into there, you can go on to other bits of the Gov's website, but when you go into the CEST tool, there's guidance. That's the governor. Have a look at it, play about.
Quick question. In regards to dates, I know it comes into effect from the 1st of April.
Yes.
Will they be looking back at anything before that?
No.
Will they be backdating it at all?
They've recently given an assurance that they're going to run it from the 6th of April. And actually, I don't think for a minute you should really worry about this transition. You should just get a move on and move people. And that if you're a month late, audit teams, once they find people are clean, they very rarely dig back. Because digging back would give you a month of pay as you earn. It's nuts. By the time you fault it, it's nuts.
Okay.
Right. Yes, I would. The next talk I'm doing, because I'm sorry about this, is I'm going to do a talk about reverse charge VAT. But I know that you've all sat there like lambs and it's horrid. I think you ought to have a jump about break and go to the loo break and think. And then those that want to hear about reverse charge VAT can come back. And those that don't can go home. So, I'm not going to pen you up like.